war takes many forms and creates casualties that they lie deeper than the final breath of soldiers. Any and all forms of art, regardless of background, were down the sights and under the gun of the Nazi regime. A culture, it can be defined by the products of a society. Its music, its literature, traditions, and especially its artwork. Certain pieces of artwork hold really deep connections to the people it comes from. Massicio undeniably shaped the world of art, and his 1426 work, St. Andrew, opened a multitude of new artistic doors. Doors that led to the most important Renaissance artists and even the Baroque movement. This piece, it was one of many that was stolen by Nazis during World War II, and had this irreplaceable work of art. Had it been lost, we wouldn't have this immediate insight into a timeless portrayal of Christianity and one of the most influential works of all time. Massicio was the first great painter of the Quattrocento period of the Italian Renaissance. And he's probably the best painter of his generation because he had this incredible skill to create lifelike figures and lifelike movements, as well as really convincing three-dimensionality in the human form. He took a lot of influence from the sculptures of Brunelleschi, and he was very famous for his collaborations with Masolino, who was a contemporary of his. He had a profound influence on many other artists throughout the Renaissance and even today. Modern art, or contemporary art as it exists, would not be what it is without Massicio. He was one of the first to use linear perspective, and he employed lots of techniques such as the vanishing point and things like that to create these very realistic depictions of human beings.
St. Andrew is Massicio's depiction of Andrew the Apostle, and it's just one of the counterparts of the timeless piece of altarpiece in Santa Maria del Carmine. The accompanying panels such as Madonna and Child, St. Paul, and the Crucifixion exemplify how Massicio revolutionized art through his techniques of spatial dimension. St. Andrew remained in the piece of altarpiece in Santa Maria del Carmine until the late 16th century, and in 1892, through diplomatic relations, was given as a gift to the Lankaronsky family. Karol Lankaronsky, the patriarch of the Lankaronsky family, was one of the most renowned art entrepreneurs of his time, with a collection counting over 1,600 paintings of some of the most influential and famous contemporary artists of the 13th and 14th centuries, and it remained in the Lankaronsky collection until 1939 when the Nazis seized their collection.
The Nazis and Hitler especially were after a very sort of specific style of art. They wanted to sort of cultivate what they deemed was culturally and aesthetically correct. Hitler was very much into things that were representational, and that's why Massicio's piece of St. Andrew and a lot of his other pieces were so important to them, is because it was he was one of the first examples of true realism in painting with spatial perspective and using chiaroscuro and a lot of very realistic values in the skin tones. So Hitler, he was very much after that sort of thing, and that's why he wanted it so bad. So when the Nazis looted it, it was taken to a salt mine in Salzburg, which is kind of terrifying if you think about it. A piece that was made in 1426, sitting unprotected in a salt mine. And sort of talking about Hitler and in relation to culture, we're starting to hit at a bigger question: is who actually has ownership over it, and how much do governments and things like that have influence, and organizations have influence over what we see our culture as. And this isn't something that's that's gone. This isn't something that ended with Hitler. It's something that we see in present day with ISIS and them trying to create their own world that is how they believe it should be.
The Monuments Men were just one of the first groups to recognize the damage that Nazi Germany was doing by looting all these paintings, and even under an insane amount of legal stringencies, they were able to pursue and acquire St. Andrew and return it to the rightful owners, the Lankoronsky family. And this is not even close to one of the only cases where this has happened. Countless of paintings were rescued by the Monuments Men and restored to the rightful owners.
St. Andrew is a case where we're actually quite lucky. It was returned to its rightful owner, but there are plenty of cases of paintings that were not returned to the rightful owner, or that just were lost entirely. And you know, this is just paintings as well as these are sculptures and entire rooms, like the Amber Room. And this just sort of gets to a question of who actually has a right to these kinds of things. We see this with the Elgin marbles. Does the London Museum deserve to have them, or do they deserve to be back in Greece? It's a tricky, a messy situation for a lot of these pieces of artwork.
The aftermath of the Nazis' art looting endeavors created tensions following the war that essentially created a whole new war in itself, and that war has and continues to manifest itself in disputes regarding who owns these pieces of art. Is it the people who received these works personally through the Nazi regime? Should they be returned to their country of origin? After we recognize the depth of these types of questions, we can begin to evaluate who art is important to, and then we can go further and ask, is art just important to a particular group of people? Is it important to a nation? Is artistry just an ideal, or is it important to everyone? We can apply these questions to individual scenarios and pieces of work such as St. Andrew. Massicio revolutionized the world of art through his works, and St. Andrew specifically created a path for some of the greatest Renaissance artists, therefore modern and contemporary art as well. Had we lost this artwork, we couldn't be able to experience firsthand a point of origin for the future of art, society, and life itself.